Amadis of Gaul, translated from the Spanish by Robert Southey, 1872. Chapter 1. The Introduction and Beginning of this History. Not many years after the Passion of our Redeemer, there was a Christian king in the Lesser Britain by name of Gartner, who, being in the law of truth, was of much devotion and good ways. The king had 2 daughters by a noble lady, his wife. The eldest was married to Lognes, king of Scotland. She was called the Lady of Garland, because her husband, taking great pleasure to behold her beautiful tresses, would have them covered only with a chaplet of flowers. Arglais and Malbea were their children, a knight and a damsel, of whom this history much mention is made. Elsina, the other daughter, was far more beautiful, and although she had been demanded in marriage by a great many princes, yet she would wed with none, but for her solitary and holy life was commonly called the lost devotee, because it was considered that for one of such rank, gifted with such beauty, and sought in marriage by so many chiefs, this way of life was not fitting. King Gartner, who was somewhat stricken in years, took delight in hunting. It happened one day that, having gone from his town of Alma to the chase, and being separated from his people as he went along the forest saying his prayers, he saw to the left a brave battle of one knight against 2. Soon he had knowledge of the twain, in that they were his own vassals, who, being proud men and of powerful lineage, had often by their evil rusticums offended him. Who the third was he knew not, but not relying so much in the worth of the one as he feared the 2, he drew aside and waited the event, which sorted to such effect as by the hand of that one the others were both slain. This done, the stranger came towards the king, and seeing him alone, said, "Gentle sir, what country is this wherein knights-errant are thus assailed?" The king replied, "Marvel not at this, knight, for our country yields as others do, both good and bad. As for these men, they have often offended, even against their lord and king, who could do no justice upon them, because of their kindred, and because they harbored in this covered mountain." "This king you speak of," replied the stranger, "I come to seek him from a far land, and bring him tidings from a dear friend. If you know where he may be found, I pray you tell me." The king answered, "Befall what may, I shall not fail to speak what is true. I am the king." The knight then, loosing his shield and helm, gave them to his squire, and went to embrace Gartner, saying that he was King Perion of Gaul, who had long desired to know him. Greatly were these kings contented that their meeting was in such a manner, and conferring together, they took their way through the wood towards the city, when suddenly a hart ran before them, which had escaped the toils. They followed at full speed, thinking to kill it, but a lion, springing from a thicket before them, seized the hart, and having torn it open with his mighty claws, stood fiercely looking at the kings. "Fierce as you are," says King Perion, "you shall leave us part of the game." And he took his arms and alighted from his horse, who, being affrighted at the wild beast, would not go near him, and placing his shield before him, went towards the lion, sword in hand. The lion left his prey and came against him. They closed, and Perion, at the moment when he was under the beast and in most danger, thrust his sword into his belly. When Gartner saw him fall, he said within himself, not without cause, that knight is famed to be the best in the world. Meanwhile their train came up, and then there was their prey and venison laid on 2 horses and carried to the city. The queen being advised of her guest, they found the palace richly adorned, and the tables covered. At the highest the king seated themselves. At the other sate was the queen with Elsina her daughter, and there they were served, as in the house of such a man beseemed. Then, being in that solace, as the princess was so beautiful, and King Perion on his part equal, in that hour and point they so regarded each other, that her great modesty and holy life could now not avail, but that she was taken with great incurable love, and the king in like manner. though till then his heart had been free, so that during the meal both the one and the other appeared absent in thought. When the tables were removed, the queen would depart to her chamber. Elsina, rising, dropped a ring from her lap, which she had taken off when she washed her hands, and in her confusion of mind forgotten. She stooped for it, and Perion, who was near her, stooped down also, so that their hands met, and taking her hand pressed it. She colored deeply and thanked the king for his service. "Ah, lady," said he, "it shall not be the last, for all my life shall be spent in your service." She followed her mother, but so disturbed that her sight was dizzy, and now not able to endure her feelings, she went and discovered them to the damsel Darioleta, in whom she confided, and with tears from her eyes and from her heart besought her to find out if King Perion loved any other woman. Darioleta, surprised at this alteration, pitied and comforted her mistress, and went to King Perion's chamber. She found his squire at the door with the king's garments, and which he was about to give him. "Friend," said she, "go you about your other affairs. I must wait upon your master." The squire, thinking it was the custom of the country, gave her the garments and went away. She then entered the chamber where the king was in bed. He, who had seen her converse with Elsina confidently, now hoped that she might bring some remedy to his passions, and said to her, all in trembling, "Fair friend, what demand ye?" "I bring you within clothe yourself," she replied. That should be for my heart," said Perion, "which is now stripped and naked of all my joys." "As how?" said the damsel. "Thus," quoth he, "coming into this land with entire liberty, and apprehending nothing but the chance of arms, here in this house I have been wounded by a mortal wound, which for which, if you, fair damsel, can procure me remedy, you shall be well recompensed." He then charged her not to discover him, but where it was respite, told her his love for Elsina. Then said Darioleta, "My lord, promise me on faith of a king and a knight that you will take to wife my lady Elsina, which when time shall serve, and right soon I will bring ye, where not only your heart shall be well satisfied, but hers also, who, it may be, is as much or more thought of dolor than you, with the same wound. But without this promise you shall never win her." The king, whose will was already disposed by God that which ensued might come to pass, took his sword which was by him, and laying his right hand upon the cross of its hilt, pronounced these words: "I swear by this cross, and this sword wherewithin I receive the order of knighthood, to perform whatever you shall require for the lady Elsina." "Be you then of good cheer," said she, "for I also will effect my promise." Darioleta returned to the princess and told her how she had sped. "You know," said she, "that in that chamber where King Perion lodges there is a door opening to the garden whence your father used to go out, and which at this present is covered with the hangings. But I have the key thereof, and we can go in at night, when all the palace are at rest." When Elsina heard this, she was highly contented, but recollecting herself, she replied, "How shall this be sought to pass, seeing that my father will lodge in the chamber with King Perion?" "Leave that to me," said the damsel, and with that they parted. When it was night, Darioleta drew aside the squire of Perion, and asked him if he was of gentle birth. "Ay," said he, "the son of a knight." "But why ask ye?" "For the desire I have," quoth she, "to know one thing, which I beseech you by the faith you owe to God and to the king your master not to hide from me. Who is the lady upon whom your master loves best?" My master," replied the squire, "loves all in general, and none as you mean." While they thus talked, Gartner came nigh. Seeing Darioleta in conference with Perion's squire, called her and asked her what he had to say to her. "In sooth, my lord," quoth she, "he tells me that his master is wont to be alone, and certainly I think he will feel himself embarrassed by your company." Gartner, hearing that, went to King Perion and said, "My lord, I have affairs to settle, and must rise in the hour of matins. That you may not be disturbed, you had better be alone in your chamber." King Perion replied, Do as I shall do as shall seem best to your liking." Then Gartner understood that Darioleta had told him rightly of his guest's inclination, and ordered his bed to be removed from Perion's apartment. These tidings Darioleta carried to her mistress, and they waited the hour when all should retire to sleep.